The mayhem, new information on the role social media played in the violence that erupted in Baltimore after the funeral of Freddie Gray, and possible links to the same kind of violence.
We really need now is for it not to get dark before police get control.
We're getting active gunfire. I just got shot at. He's behind Planned Parenthood.
Active shooter, UCC 1140 Umpqua College Road.
10 minutes of terror and a rampage that seemed to last.
Well, no, this is just the latest in a string of terror attacks besieging this country, which is still on high alert after more than 100 people.
The weird thing was the car just pulled away very slowly, and it started coming at
9:36 p.m. Shooters in a black vehicle sprayed bullets into a popular bar, killing.
It was very violent, as you heard from Bob. We met a couple other people coming down the street saying that they heard the gunshots as well, and pretty much everybody just hit.
There's a popular saying in the news industry, if it bleeds, it leads, meaning that if it's a violent story, it's going to lead on a news program. But why is this the case? Why are violent stories always leading?
I think that's just always has been the case. People are attracted to violence, no matter what. What I see in the newsroom is we try, if there's a big story, of course we'll cover it. If it's a shooting done in Boston or recently the terror attacks in Belgium. Big stories that interest people. I feel violence has an interest to people because it could happen to them if they're not aware of it.
I think with violent stories and crime stories, people are excited by them. And I think it's our human nature, and it's a piece of our human nature we don't always want to admit to. And a lot of times you hear people say, but there's no good news on the news, or there's no good news in the paper. There are tons of good news stories in the newspaper. If you pick up the Globe, you pick up the Lowell Sun, the Eagle Tribune, there's a lot of good stories in there about, Eagle Scouts and, the high school science fair, or even just, some kid that saw a kid recently who had collected 250 pairs of jeans for the homeless. Those stories are there, but they don't go viral. They don't capture the attention of people.
I just feel violence has been a part of our culture, so I just feel the news is tended to go out and cover violent stories because it's just part of everyday life.
If you're going online and you see two stories, and one of them says, Boy Scout helps old lady cross the street, and the other one says, Boy Scout shoots old lady in crosswalk, you're going to click on the Boy Scout shoots old lady in crosswalk. And I think it's kind of it's also like, you wouldn't expect yourself to be involved in something like that, so you're like, oh, it's a little voyeurism of wanting to know, what happened and why did it happen, and I think we kind of enjoy that gruesomeness. And for as much as people say they don't like the bad news, that's always the top hit. When I worked at the Sun, we'd look at the, what the top hits were for the day and the most emailed stories and that kind of thing. And it was always either scandals or crime stories. Lowell's a great city, but the Boston media only comes to Lowell when there's a shooting or a stabbing or some kind of a crime. So the people that don't live in the immediate area and don't know all the good things that are happening in Lowell. If you live in Boston or the South Shore or someplace and you only see what's on Channel 5 or Fox or Channel 7 about Lowell, it's always crime or drugs. So you never see the good parts of it. And but I think it's just that sensationalism. It's looking for something that's going to get ratings. It's going to sell papers.
But there's another problem. Many times when the media reports on violent stories, there's bias in their reporting. One group that's dedicated to criticizing media bias is FAIR.
We keep an eye on corporate news media, looking at the issues that are being covered, what issues are not being covered, and looking at how what kind of spin is being put on the issues that people need to know about in order to participate in a democratic society. The key bias in stories about violence is that media outlets are trying to suggest that there is a you that's the audience and you are in danger from them, which is some other group that violence can be blamed on.
Everyone wants to be first. So a lot of times they'll jump on the air with false information.
We were wrong. Our people on scene were wrong. Theirs was an error.
They'll just throw all this information out there because they want to be the first person to report it. When most of the time, anything you hear in the first probably first 24 hours of most news stories, I feel like is, worthless.
This isn't the only ethical issue when it comes to bias reporting.
In domestic coverage, there is a lot of racism in coverage because you perceive the audience as being white and portray that white audience as being in danger from people of color. It makes for an effective ratings boosting tool that would not be so effective if you had a more nuanced and realistic view of where violence is coming from in our society.
These racially biased media coverage of violent stories has harmful effects. African Americans and Latinos are more likely than whites to appear as lawbreakers in the news, and this happens particularly when the news is focusing on violent crimes. African Americans in criminal roles tend to outnumber African Americans in socially positive roles, in newscasts and newspapers. Depictions of African American suspects tend to be more symbolically threatening than those of whites accused of similar crimes. According to a report on MediaMatters.org entitled Report, New York City television stations continue disproportionate coverage of black crime. The report states that, according to the NYPD, in the past 4 years, African Americans were arrested as suspects 54% for murders, 55% for thefts, and 49% for assaults. But between August 18th and December 31st of 2014, news stations' coverage of murders for suspects was 74%, thefts 84%, and assaults 73% for African Americans. They state that in 2011, crime stories led all news topics and were linked to African Americans.
It is a shame, and I think that the media has more of a responsibility, should have more responsibility in balancing that, and also bringing some statistics into it. I mean, if there's a shooting in Lowell, then it's suddenly, Lowell's dangerous. Well, what if there's only been 2 shootings in Lowell in a year? Compare that to other mid-sized cities. And most of the time, not that this is acceptable, but most of the time it is, it's gang violence. And if you're not in a gang, you're not going to get shot.
It's largely driven by the need for ratings, the commercial imperatives of advertising-based news reporting. I also think that people do have biases that they come in with. And if you have a journalistic profession that is drawn mostly from one group and excludes other groups, it will likely reflect the prejudices of the one group and not of the other group.
I feel the reporters do their best to get both sides of the story. Every story has 2 sides of the story. You try to get the victim's family, or you try to get what the officials say happened in the case. I don't think there's bias, but I tend to think that if the story becomes bigger and bigger, there can become biases if they only look to one side of the story, not the other. I feel you do see that primarily in the networks. For example, if you look at the Trayvon Martin case, big national story, started out in the Orlando area and just grew nationally after what happened. And you saw sometimes, this channel will only cover Trayvon Martin, while this channel would only cover what George Zimmerman had to say. I feel in the national networks, it's very hard to get both sides of the story sometimes.
I think that people need to call attention to it. I think that it's important to look at who's being portrayed as violent in news media.
One recent story that shows all of this happened last year in the city of Baltimore. On April 12, 2015, Freddie Gray Jr., a 25-year-old man, was arrested by the Baltimore Police Department for possessing what the police alleged was an illegal switchblade. While being transported in a police van, Gray fell into a coma and was taken to a trauma center. Gray died on April 19, 2015. On April 21, 2015, pending an investigation of the incident, 6 Baltimore police officers were suspended with pay. When news got out about this, the city of Baltimore was outraged and went to the streets to protest. Instead of focusing on the entire story that was going on, the news media decided to focus on the small amount of violent rioting that went on, which depict Baltimore as a violent city. And some news programs were particularly racist when reporting on this story.
Right now, this guy's walking out with a Colt 45 poster, and then he's burning it, but you certainly got a lot of free liquor that's going on in the 5-finger discount here.
This looks like some riot in some third world nation.
Be interested to hear from those police about their level of frustration that they have to stand here and watch these thugs go thugging.
We watched it this afternoon with these boulders hitting these cops. Black Gorilla family.
The Black Gorilla family.
The Black Gorilla family.
The Black Gorilla family.
And the Black Gorilla family.
The Black Gorilla's family.
F you motherfuckers, man.
But why would the media choose to focus on just the rioting?
For ratings. I mean, people are going to watch the people throwing the Molotov cocktails and the being crazy in the street. And some of the people they interviewed during the Baltimore riots were just people looking for attention too. I mean, they were characters, right? And it wasn't bringing anything to the news story.
Fox News, are you from Baltimore?
We are from Baltimore. I'm a city councilman in the district.
You're a city councilman. What is it? As you're watching this, tell me what this means for your city.
Cease!
What do you mean?
Cease fire!
When you're watching this go on, does it break your heart to see this happen?
Oh, definitely. I mean, what it is young boys, the young folks of this community showing decades old of anger, frustration, for a system has failed them. I mean, this is bigger than Freddie Gray. This is about the social economics of poor urban America. And, these young guys are frustrated, they're upset, and unfortunately, they're displaying it in a very destructive manner. You know, when folks are undereducated, unfortunately, they don't have the same intellectual voice to express it the way other people doing, and that's what we see through the violence today.
We just watched this liquor store being looted, and there's a bunch of folks running in and out of there.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with nothing.
What's wrong with that? And the police are all the way down there.
Yeah.
You're a city council member, is that right?
Is it right for people to loot? No. I mean, I think you've missed everything I've tried to articulate to you. What I've said is everything out here has happened wrong. The violence is wrong. That's never acceptable. Understanding that there's a symptom of something that's going on here. And what I'm trying to articulate to you is when you look at communities like this in urban America, lack of education, lack of commercial development, lack of opportunities. It's the social economics of it. It has nothing to do with West Baltimore or this particular corner in Baltimore. This could erupt anywhere in socially, economically deprived America.
Well, we've certainly seen this in other cities. Obviously, Ferguson comes to mind.
We also see it at rallies like at Kentucky. When Kentucky lost that basketball game, we see crowds that loot and that flip over cars and stuff. But unfortunately, all the 95% of the positive rallying that has been occurring here in Baltimore, the national media is going to focus on this, and that's the problem.
With all this being said, is there any hope that the media will stop being biased when reporting on violent stories?
I don't really see it going another way unless, the next generation of reporters can somehow turn it around and try to be more accurate, more ethical, or if the public stops demanding it.
I think that that you can effectively put pressure on media corporations to give a more honest reflection of the world around us.
So the next time you see a news story, just remember, it might not be the whole story.
Continuing coverage throughout the day here and analysis now on Fox News Channel and satellite and cable. I'm Shepard Smith, Fox News, New York.